2 months after burying my twin boys, the mechanic's voice cracked through the phone. "Mrs. Holloway, someone cut your brake lines, and I have the security footage." My name is Vera Holloway. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was a mother of 2 beautiful 7-year-old boys, Jasper and Felix. Now I'm the woman everyone in Maplewood whispers about when I walk past. The mother who killed her children. The woman who chose a text message over 2 precious lives. When Roy Brenner called me that Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in my empty house, staring at a photo of my family at the beach last summer. Jasper had ice cream on his nose. Felix was missing his 2 front teeth, grinning like he'd won the lottery. My husband Damien had his arms around all 3 of us, back when he could still look at me without hatred in his eyes. "Mrs. Holloway, you need to come down to the shop right now," Roy had said. "Don't bring anyone. Just you. I found something that changes everything." Roy had serviced our cars for 15 years. He'd given the boys lollipops every time we came in for an oil change. He was the kind of mechanic who still wore his name on his shirt and told you the truth about what your car needed, not what would make him the most money. When I got to his shop, he led me straight to the back, past the other cars, to where my crumpled minivan sat like a metal skeleton. The front end was completely crushed. The windshield was gone. There were still bloodstains on the airbags that I couldn't look at. "I've been doing this for 25 years, Roy said, pulling on his work gloves. "Something about your brake failure didn't sit right with me, so I did some extra investigating." He slid under the car and pointed his flashlight at the brake lines. "These aren't torn from impact, Mrs. Holloway. They're cut. Clean, deliberate cuts. Someone wanted enough fluid to remain so you'd get partway down the road, but not enough to stop when you needed to." My knees buckled. Roy caught my arm and steadied me. "There's more," he said quietly. "I pulled my security footage from the past week." He led me to his office, to an ancient desktop computer covered in invoice stickers and coffee rings. The screen showed grainy black and white footage of his parking lot. A figure in a baseball cap and hoodie approached our van at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, 3 days before the accident. "Watch his hands," Roy said. The figure pulled something from his pocket. Snips. He slid under the van, just like Roy had moments before, but it was the hands that made my blood turn to ice. I knew those hands, the way they moved, the wedding ring that caught the security light, the thick fingers that had built tree houses for my boys. "That's Vernon," I whispered. "That's my father-in-law." Roy nodded and clicked to another angle. "Look at the car parked next to the van." The interior light flicked on for just a second as someone adjusted the rear view mirror. Constance, my mother-in-law, the woman who'd held me as I sobbed in the hospital, the woman who'd called me a murderer at my children's funeral. She had been there watching her husband sabotage my brakes. But here's what destroyed me completely. They thought they were killing their own son. Damien took the minivan every Thursday for his real estate business. He hauled signs and equipment for his showings. That Thursday morning, his BMW wouldn't start. "Take the van," I had told him. "I'll jump your car after I drop the boys at school." But then Felix spilled orange juice all over his school pants. In the chaos of finding clean clothes, getting them both ready again, making sure they had their homework, I grabbed the van keys out of pure habit. A mother's muscle memory, the simple act that saved my husband's life and cost my children theirs. When I saw those familiar hands on that grainy footage, wearing the same wedding ring I'd seen at every family dinner for 15 years, cutting the brake lines with the precision of someone who'd worked with tools his whole life, my world shattered for the second time. The first time was when I woke up in the hospital and learned my boys were gone. The second was when I realized who had killed them. Vernon Holloway owned a chain of hardware stores. He'd built his empire from nothing, he liked to say. Expected Damien to take over, to continue the family legacy. When Damien refused 3 weeks before the accident, choosing his real estate career over his father's dreams, Vernon had called him an ungrateful son. Said he was writing him out of the will, but Vernon had found another way to profit from his son. A $3 million life insurance policy he'd taken out 6 months earlier. Damien probably never even knew it existed. My boys died because their grandfather valued money over family. They died because I grabbed the wrong keys. They died because 2 people who claimed to love them decided that murder was better than disappointment. And for 2 months, everyone believed I was the killer. Life before that September morning was beautifully ordinary. I'd wake up at 6:30 to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, while Jasper and Felix argued over who got to pick the cartoon. Our kitchen always smelled like maple syrup and coffee, with crayon drawings stuck to every surface of the refrigerator. The boys had just started second grade at Maplewood Elementary, and their biggest worry was whether they'd get picked for the kickball team at recess. "Mom, can we get ice cream after school?" Felix had asked that morning, his gap-toothed smile already working its magic on me. He was missing his 2 front teeth and whistled when he talked, which made Jasper laugh every single time. "Only if you both ace your spelling tests," I said, knowing full well we'd get ice cream regardless. I was that kind of mother, the kind who said no but meant maybe, who threatened consequences but usually caved at the first sign of their dimpled smiles. Damien kissed me goodbye at 7:15, same as every morning. "I've got 3 showings today," he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. "That Victorian on Elm finally got an offer. Might close by end of month." He'd been working longer hours lately, coming home after the boys were already in bed, smelling like cologne I didn't recognize. But the real estate market was booming, and I trusted him. That's what 15 years of marriage gives you, a blind faith that tomorrow will look just like today. My mother-in-law Constance had called the night before with an unusual request. "Vernon and I want to take the boys to the lake house this weekend," she'd said, her voice sweeter than normal. "Give you and Damien some alone time. Lord knows young couples need that." It struck me as odd because Constance rarely offered to babysit. She was the type of grandmother who loved her grandsons fiercely but preferred them in small doses, usually at restaurants where other people could see her being a doting grandmother. Vernon had been different with the boys. He'd taught them to use a hammer, let them help in his workshop building birdhouses. "These hands are going to run the family business someday," he'd say, ruffling their hair with his calloused fingers. Jasper loved the smell of sawdust and wood stain. Felix preferred the store's candy aisle but pretended to love tools to make his grandfather proud. That morning felt rushed but normal. I packed 2 identical lunches, peanut butter and jelly cut into triangles, apple slices, and juice boxes. Jasper had forgotten his library book, so we had to run back inside. Felix couldn't find his lucky pencil, the one with the race car eraser. These were our daily catastrophes, the tiny emergencies that made us perpetually 5 minutes late. "Mom, will you volunteer for the field trip next week?" Jasper asked as I buckled him into his booster seat. "Mrs. Patterson says we're going to the Science Museum." "Of course, baby. I already signed the form." "Tommy's mom never volunteers," Felix added, competitive even about parental involvement. "He says she's too busy." I worked part-time at Riverside Veterinary Clinic 3 days a week, just enough to keep my skills sharp and contribute to our savings. Dr. Brennan was flexible, understanding that my boys came first. I'd been thinking about going full-time once they got a little older, maybe when they hit middle school and stopped needing me so much. My sister Trina had texted me the night before and again that morning. "Coffee tomorrow? I need sister time. Brad's being an ass again." She was 4 years older than me, but somehow always picked the wrong men. Brad was just the latest in a string of disappointments, a bartender who thought he was going to be a famous musician at 42. "Running late, see you at..." I had started typing at a red light, planning to finish the message when I parked at school. I never sent texts while driving. Never. I was the mother who lectured other parents about it in the pickup line, who shared safety articles on Facebook about distracted driving. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the boys' faces as we drove down our tree-lined street. They were singing along to the radio, some pop song they'd learned all the words to despite my efforts to keep them listening to kid-appropriate music. Felix's whistle made every S sound like a tiny tornado. "Love you to the moon," I said as I pulled up to the school. "And back," they shouted in unison, already unbuckling their seatbelts, eager to join their friends on the playground. Those were the last words I ever heard them say. The accident happened at 8:48 a.m. on Riverside Drive, where the road curves sharply near the old mill. I dropped the boys at school and was heading to meet Trina at our usual coffee shop downtown. The morning was crisp, autumn leaves swirling across the windshield. I remember reaching for my phone in the cup holder, not to text, just to skip a song that reminded me of my college years, when everything felt simpler. That's when I pressed the brake pedal for the first time. It felt soft, mushy, like stepping on a sponge. The curve was coming up fast. I pressed harder. The pedal went straight to the floor. My minivan was heading straight for the guardrail at 50 miles per hour. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, tires screaming against asphalt. The van tilted, balanced on two wheels for a terrifying second, then flipped. The guardrail exploded against us. Glass showered like deadly rain. The world spun 3 times before we dropped 20 feet into the creek below. I woke up in Maplewood General 3 days later. The first thing I saw was Damien sitting in the corner chair, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his phone, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched. The second thing I noticed was the pain. Everywhere. Like my body had been taken apart and reassembled wrong. The boys... My voice came out like gravel scraping metal. Damien's face crumpled, then hardened. They're gone, Vera. Both of them. The words didn't make sense. I dropped them at school. They were safe. They had spelling tests and kickball and afternoon ice cream to look forward to. But then the memories crashed back. The van, the flipping, the terrible silence after the metal stopped screaming. They hadn't been at school. They'd been with me. No, that was wrong. I dropped them off. I remembered their backpacks bouncing, their voices calling goodbye, but the detective who arrived an hour later had different information. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Detective Morrison," she said, her voice professionally sympathetic. The school confirmed that Jasper and Felix never arrived that morning. Witnesses saw them in your vehicle at the time of the accident. The room spun. That's impossible. I dropped them off. I watched them walk through the gate. "Ma'am, you suffered a severe head injury. Confusion is normal, but we have multiple witnesses who saw the boys in your van when it went over the guardrail, and we found this." She held up an evidence bag containing my phone. The screen was cracked, but still showing my last action. A half-written text to Trina. "Running late. See you at..." The message timestamp is 8:47 a.m., Detective Morrison continued. "The accident occurred at 8:48. You were texting while driving with your children in the vehicle." "I wasn't texting while driving." The words tore from my throat. "I would never do that with my boys in the car. Never." But who believes a mother with a head injury and a half-sent text as evidence? Constance arrived within 2 hours, Vernon behind her like a shadow. Her face was swollen from crying, but when she looked at me, grief transformed into rage. "You murdered my grandbabies," she hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. "For what? To tell Trina you were running late? Those precious boys are dead because you couldn't wait 5 minutes to send a text?" Vernon stood silent, his carpenter's hands clenched into fists. The man who'd built tree houses for my boys couldn't even look at me. "Constance, let's go," he finally said, his voice hollow. "There's nothing for us here." The news spread through Maplewood like wildfire. "Did you hear about Vera Holloway, texting and driving with those babies in the car?" At the grocery store, people stepped aside when they saw me coming. Former friends crossed streets to avoid me. The principal at the boys' school sent a letter about the dangers of distracted driving to all parents, my tragedy reduced to a cautionary tale. Damien moved into the guest room that first night home. 2 weeks later, he packed his things. "I can't look at you," he said, folding his shirts with mechanical precision. "Every time I do, I see them in that van, terrified, crying for their mother to save them while you typed on your phone." "I wasn't texting, Damien. Please, you have to believe me." "The evidence doesn't lie, Vera. The detective showed me everything. The phone records, the witness statements. Our boys are dead because you made a choice. A stupid, selfish choice." He moved back to his parents' house. The divorce papers arrived a month later. The man who'd sworn to stand by me in sickness and health couldn't stand by me in tragedy and blame. 2 months of existing in purgatory passed like decades. The house felt like a mausoleum, every corner holding memories that cut like glass. I'd preserved the boys' room exactly as they'd left it that morning. Unmade beds with superhero sheets tangled from their restless sleep. Legos scattered across the floor and half-built creations they'd never finish. Drawings taped to the wall showing our family as stick figures, holding hands under a yellow circle sun. In every picture, they'd drawn us smiling. I survived on automatic pilot. Wake up, make coffee, sit at the kitchen table, stare at nothing, sleep, Repeat. The life insurance company refused to pay out because I'd been found negligent. The mortgage was overdue. Bill collectors called daily, but I stopped answering the phone. What was the point? Everyone in town had already judged and sentenced me. Trina tried to visit weekly, bringing casseroles I wouldn't eat and comfort I couldn't accept. Vera, you need to fight this, she'd say. This isn't like you. The sister I know would never text and drive with her boys in the car. The evidence says otherwise, I'd respond, my voice flat and dead as everything else about me. My parents had flown up from Florida for the funeral, then fled back to their retirement community as soon as the last shovel of dirt hit the caskets. Dad had hugged me once, stiffly, like I might contaminate him with my guilt. Mom had whispered, "How could you?" before getting on the plane. They hadn't called since. The car had been towed to Brenner's auto shop for the insurance investigation. I'd signed whatever papers they put in front of me without reading them. The twisted metal that had been our family van was the last thing I wanted to think about. But Roy Brenner wasn't the type to let things go unexplored. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another creditor or someone calling to express their disgust. But Roy's name on the caller ID made me pause. He'd always been kind to the boys. "Mrs. Holloway, I need you to come down here," he said, his usually cheerful voice serious and tight. "Don't bring anyone, just you. This is important." "Roy, I can't look at that van. Please don't ask me to do that. You need to see what I found. It changes everything. Everything, Vera." Something in his voice made me grab Damien's old truck keys. He'd taken the BMW when he left, abandoning the beat-up Ford he'd had since college. The drive to Brenner's auto shop took 12 minutes. I counted every second, wondering what could possibly matter anymore. The shop smelled like motor oil and coffee, familiar scents from years of routine maintenance and friendly chats while waiting for oil changes. Roy led me past the regular repair bays to the back lot where insurance claims waited for processing. My van sat in the corner, compressed and broken, its cheerful burgundy paint now scratched and stained with creek mud. "I've been doing this for 25 years, Roy said, pulling on his work gloves. "When they brought your van in, something bothered me. The insurance investigator just looked at the obvious damage, checked the boxes, and left. But I kept thinking about those boys, about how you always made them wear their seatbelts before you'd even start the engine." He grabbed a trouble light and slid under the wreckage. "Look here," he said, pointing to the brake lines. "See these cuts? They're not torn from impact. They're clean, precise. Someone cut these lines with tools, probably aviation snips. They left just enough fluid so you'd get down the road a ways, but not enough to stop when you really needed to." My legs went weak. I grabbed the van's crumpled bumper to steady myself. "Someone tried to kill me?" "Someone tried to kill someone," Roy corrected, pulling himself out from under the vehicle. "Question is, who was supposed to be driving that morning?" Then it hit me like a physical blow. Thursday was Damien's usual day to take the van. He hauled real estate signs, lawn decorations, and staging materials for his properties. He complained about it constantly, said it made him look less professional, but admitted it was practical. That Thursday morning, his BMW wouldn't start. "Take the van," I'd told him while packing the boys' lunches. "I'll jump your car after I drop them at school." But then Felix had spilled orange juice all over his school pants. In the chaos of finding clean clothes, making sure they weren't late, getting them both buckled in while they complained about missing morning recess, I'd grabbed the van keys out of pure habit, muscle memory, a mother's automation that saved my husband's life and cost my children theirs. "Roy, do you have security cameras?" He nodded grimly. I had the same thought. "Let me show you what I found." Roy led me to his cluttered office, past invoices yellowed with age and a calendar still showing the wrong month. His ancient desktop computer hummed to life, screen flickering before showing multiple video files dated from the week before the accident. He clicked on one labeled Tuesday 2 a.m. The grainy black and white footage showed the parking lot behind Brenner's shop where customers could leave vehicles overnight. Our burgundy van sat in the far corner, barely visible under the single security light. A figure emerged from the shadows, walking with purpose, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a dark hoodie. "Watch the hands," Roy said quietly. The figure pulled something from his pocket. The security light caught the metal gleam of aviation snips. Professional grade, the kind sold at hardware stores. He dropped to his knees beside our van, then slid underneath with practiced ease. Those hands worked methodically, deliberately, but it was when he emerged and turned slightly toward the camera that my blood turned to ice. The wedding ring on his left hand caught the light, a thick gold band with 3 small diamonds that Vernon had worn for 40 years. The same ring I'd seen him twist when he was angry, the same hands that had built my boys' tree houses now destroying their future. "That's Vernon," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "That's my father-in-law." Roy nodded and clicked to another file. "There's more. Look at the car parked 20 feet away." A dark sedan sat in the shadows, someone visible in the driver's seat. The person shifted, adjusting the rearview mirror, and for 1 second the interior light illuminated her face. Constance. She'd been there watching, making sure her husband completed his task. The woman who'd held my boys as babies, who'd sung them lullabies, sat complicit in planning murder. "I need to make copies of these files," Roy said, already pulling out USB drives. "This is evidence of attempted murder." "They were trying to kill Damien," I said, the pieces falling together with horrible clarity. "He always took the van on Thursdays. They knew his schedule." Roy pulled up another document on his computer. "I did some research after finding those cut brake lines. Public records show Vernon took out a $3 million life insurance policy on Damien 6 months ago. As his father and business partner in the family stores, he could do it without Damien's knowledge." 3 weeks before the accident, Damien had come home from Sunday dinner at his parents' house in a rage. "Dad gave me an ultimatum," he'd said, pacing our bedroom. "Take over the hardware stores or be cut from the will. I told him I'd rather be disowned than give up everything I've built. He called me an ungrateful son, said I was spitting on everything he'd worked for." Vernon had found another way to profit from his son's choice. I called Detective Morrison from Roy's phone, my hands shaking so violently I could barely dial. "Detective, this is Vera Holloway. I'm at Brenner's auto shop. You need to come here immediately with a forensics team." She arrived within 15 minutes, skeptical until Roy showed her the footage and the brake lines. Her professional composure cracked when she saw Vernon's face clearly in the enhanced video Roy had managed to brighten. "We'll need to verify this evidence," she said, but her tone had changed completely. "Mr. Brenner, I'll need all your original files and a statement." The arrest happened that evening. Vernon was in his study at home, reviewing inventory reports when police surrounded the house. Constance tried to run, actually tried to escape through the back door in her nightgown and slippers, but they caught her in the garden where she'd taught my boys to plant tomatoes. Under interrogation, Constance broke within 3 hours. "It was supposed to be Damien," she sobbed to the detectives. "He was destroying the family legacy. Vernon worked 40 years building that business empire, and Damien just threw it away for what? Selling other people's houses? The brake lines were calculated to fail on Highway 47, where Damien always drove to his Thursday property tours. The ravine there is deeper. No one would survive." "But my boys were in that van," I said when Detective Morrison played me the confession tape. "We never meant for the boys to be hurt," Constance had wailed in the recording. "They were supposed to be at school. You were supposed to be in the BMW. If that stupid car had started like it should have, if Felix hadn't spilled his juice, if you hadn't taken the van by mistake, everything would have gone according to plan." Vernon never confessed. He sat, stone-faced through his trial, even when they played the security footage, even when they showed the receipt for the aviation snips purchased with his credit card, even when the forensic accountant testified about the life insurance policy with forged signatures. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in that courtroom every single day, staring at the backs of Vernon and Constance's heads, wondering how people who'd bounced my children on their knees could plan their death so methodically. Vernon got life without parole for premeditated murder. Constance got 25 to life as an accomplice. When they read the verdict, she collapsed, screaming my boys' names, begging God for forgiveness I knew she'd never receive. "You killed my babies," I said during my victim impact statement, my voice steady for the first time in months. "You orphaned your own grandchildren for money and pride. Jasper and Felix died terrified and confused because their grandfather valued $3 million more than their lives. They died because you couldn't accept that your son chose his own path." Damien came back the day after the verdict. He stood on our doorstep like a stranger, hollow-eyed and 20 pounds lighter. "I blamed you," he whispered, unable to meet my eyes. While my parents were holding me, consoling me, planning the funeral with me, they were the ones who killed our boys. I chose them over you. I abandoned you when you needed me most. We tried therapy. Dr. Martinez saw us twice a week for a year. We sat on her beige couch, attempting to rebuild something from ashes. But some bridges can't be unburned. Every time we looked at each other, we saw Jasper and Felix. Every shared memory led back to that morning, to orange juice on school pants, to keys grabbed in haste, to choices that seemed insignificant but changed everything. We divorced 2 years later, not from anger but from shared ghosts that made breathing in the same room impossible. Damien signed over the house to me, then disappeared to Seattle. I heard he's remarried now, has a daughter. I hope she has better grandparents than my boys did. I moved to Portland, started over at a new veterinary clinic where no one knew my story. Dr. Walsh hired me without asking about the gap in my resume, somehow sensing that some stories don't need to be told to be understood. My coworkers think I'm quiet, reserved. They don't know I'm just trying to make it through each day without seeing my boys' faces in every child that comes through the door. Trina visits me monthly, driving 3 hours each way. Our relationship rebuilt itself on the foundation of truth. Stronger now than before. "I should have believed you," she says every visit, and every time I tell her it's okay, even though we both know it will never really be okay. She's married now to a good man named David, who knows our whole story and still treats me like family. Roy Brenner refused payment for his investigation work. "Justice isn't a service you charge for," he said when I tried to give him a check. "Those boys deserve to have the truth known." He still sends me a Christmas card every year, signed from someone who believes in the truth. Last year, he included a photo of his new grandson, same age as my boys would have been. I volunteer now at a grief counseling center for parents who've lost children. Every Thursday evening, I sit in a circle with other broken parents, and sometimes I tell them my story. Not for sympathy, but as a reminder that truth has a way of surfacing, even from the darkest depths. That sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. Last week, I received a letter from Constance in prison. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. 10 pages of apologies, explanations, and desperate pleas for forgiveness. She wrote about how she dreams of the boys every night, how she wakes up thinking she hears them laughing. I burned the letter without responding. Some words don't deserve to be heard. Some forgiveness can't be given. I keep one photo on my nightstand now, taken the morning before everything changed. Jasper and Felix in their pajamas, morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, chocolate chip pancake smiles and messy hair. "Love you to the moon," I whisper to it every night. And back, my sweet boys, always and forever back. The mechanic who found those cut brake lines didn't just solve a crime. He gave me back my truth. In a world quick to judge and slow to question, Roy Brenner reminded me that sometimes the most important evidence isn't what everyone sees, but what one person is brave enough to look for. If this story touched you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when the truth came to light in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories every week. Your support helps us bring these important narratives to light.